What's up, guys? This is Eric with Underdogs of Addiction. Today is the start of a new channel. So today I just wanted to speak about my testimony, what led me to the point of creating this channel. And I'm going to speak about the events that took place that led me to finally seeking treatment and getting help for my trauma. We look at it as addiction, but in reality, it was years of trauma, unhealthy coping mechanisms, codependency, and a lot of things. Just to catch you guys up, I graduated from a 5-month treatment center called Treehouse Recovery. It's an intense outpatient treatment center paired with a sober living. There's many locations. Mine was in Portland, Oregon. It was founded at Costa Mesa, and it really has a unique way of treating addiction through healing the brain through exercise, teamwork, connection, accountability, commitment, using cutting edge therapy techniques to help heal people. And it's changed my life. So I'm going to talk to you guys about how I ended up at Treehouse Recovery, how I ended up becoming a regular member of NA and AA, and about my history in the music industry and things of that nature. So about this time last year, I was in the worst place I've ever been emotionally, mentally, and physically. I was a former, amateur training MMA guy or whatever. Not a pro fighter or anything, but that was my way of connecting. I trained MMA for years, was a musician, ran a really successful digital marketing company that allowed me to just work for myself full time, working with multiple record labels, some smaller, some bigger, marketing music videos. So I kind of had built this life of, doing all the things I like to do. But I did not address what was beneath. I thought I had it figured out. I had the job I wanted. I was making music I loved. I was going to therapy. I was training MMA. But all the while, all these things were still bubbling under the surface for me. And I knew that it was going to catch up to me, because as soon as I wasn't doing one of these things, if I wasn't training, if I wasn't going to therapy, if I wasn't with my codependent girlfriend, if I wasn't, sucking all my time up doing these things, I couldn't sit with myself. And I knew eventually it would come to get me. And eventually, when the COVID lockdowns started happening in 2020, I slowly but surely lost my MMA team due to not being able to train, my one-on-one therapy, and that was kind of like an off and on thing for about a year. And then eventually, I stopped going to MMA. I met a new person that I started dating, and we entered into an extremely codependent relationship. She was an addict as well, and it was just codependency right away. And since I had lost my MMA, at the time I still was doing my music, but I was slowly starting to lose things. And once I found this extremely addictive codependent relationship, I stopped making music, which I've been doing for 15 years. I stopped going to MMA. The gym reopened, but I stopped going. I stopped focusing on my purpose and my path. And one thing you'll learn in treatment and through, on your way to recovery, is that a lot of us have attachment issues, which are very addicting, and we're trying to basically recreate relationships from our past and fix and heal those, which never work. So I went down this relationship. In that relationship, there was a lot of insecurity on both sides, a lot of trying to control each other. There was a lot of me, at the time, it was a lot of me running off with my friends and hiding and doing coke and drinking and disconnecting from the relationship. And there was a little kid involved, a 3-year-old girl who I still love to this day, and I had a great experience being around for her. And the story is even deeper than that. The little girl, her aunt, was one of my best friends in high school. And unfortunately, her aunt, her name was Angel, she started getting into cocaine and drinking, and she died in a drunk driving accident when I was 18. And she was one of the only people that believed in me in high school to follow my music dreams, which I did, and I had a lot of success in. And ironically, I ended up dating a girl who had a child who the child's aunt was her, and I didn't even know it. And so there was a special connection that me and that child had. And so this is kind of the stuff that started brewing during pretty much my final run that destroyed me. All the while, I still had a lot of issues with my father, unresolved trauma with my dad. I had literally had 7 or 8 family members die from the age of 23 to 31. I lost both of my uncles. One of my uncles was developmentally disabled, autistic, and I basically was with him my whole life. He was like my brother. He had a heart transplant at the age of 18, and he ended up living to be 40, but I knew his time was coming. My other uncle died unexpectedly, who was pretty much like my father figure, Mike Cortez. He was a good man. He showed me how to work hard. He was a quiet man, and was just a good leader. And that one really hurt me. When I was 26, he had been going through an unfortunate situation with his wife where there was some infidelity, and he was really hurt, but they tried to stay together for the sake of the children. But I knew that it really messed him up. And just before his death, his mother, my grandmother, my Oma, which I have tattooed right here, you can see, she had passed away. I was really struggling from losing her, and we were all struggling. My grandmother was an immigrant from Germany, born and raised. Her dad was in the war. He when I talk about trauma, her dad was in the war. He came back from the war, and unfortunately, the post-traumatic stress from the war, he was not the same man. He abused his children. My grandma told me a lot about that. And losing her was tough because she was with me my whole life, and I lived with her. She lived with us at times, and she struggled from manic depression, and I seen firsthand mental illness and trauma run rampant in my family. And she was the first. My grandmother was manic depressive. I used to see her drink. I used to just see a lot of crazy stuff, and I hadn't really processed all of that. So during this time when I was 26, she had passed away, and so I was drinking a lot because that loss really hurt. 3 years prior to that, my Aunt Raisha, who was like my big sister, passed away when I was 23 from a fentanyl overdose, which was my first family death. And I didn't really know how to deal with it. But after her, it just piled on. It was her, my aunt. But my uncle's one was really the nail in the coffin because, like I said, he was struggling with his marriage. And I was hungover on Thanksgiving, and I didn't show up to Thanksgiving, and he called me, and I didn't know he was going to be mad that I didn't show up, and he was like, "I really need you. Can you please come?" And I was so hungover. I was like, "No, I can't." And something in my heart told me this would probably be the last time that I ever have Thanksgiving with him, which was a completely irrational thought because, like, my uncle was pretty healthy, And a few months later, he passed away. And, I felt really bad, a lot of guilt that I wasn't there for him. I think he really needed me at the time. And he looked just like me, he was my uncle, my big uncle. And that death really messed me up, and I started drinking heavily. That's when I became an alcoholic. I was not an alcoholic before that I knew of. I never thought of really quitting drinking until my mid-20s, and then after that, my other grandmother passed away. told you, my uncle, then my sister's child, he was a boy. We had 3 girls already, my sister had 3 girls already. My twin sister, who was probably the closest person to me, and her and her husband Eman, who's a great brother-in-law, and I love that guy. They had a son, and it was premature. Me and my sister were premature. We thought nothing of it. We thought that everything would be fine, and unfortunately, after 1 month of being in the NICU, I believe, he passed away, and I felt really guilty because, like, I wanted to be an uncle, and he was going to be like the first line of men, because I didn't have any kids. My sister was the first one, and we were going to raise a son. I was going to be an uncle, and I was so fucking stoked. And I remember I was getting ready to drive up to Tacoma. I'm from Washington State. I was driving to Tacoma to see my sister because I was worried about her, and there was like a weird connection we have, and like starting to get ready, and she called me and she said, like, don't come. And I said, why? And she said that he didn't make it. And that really messed me up, and I just felt guilty that I wasn't able to be there for her, and yeah, I showed up to the funeral a couple weeks later. I went on a bender of my lifetime, did a bunch of cocaine, was drinking at my friend's house, just completely numbing myself, because I said, if God is good, why would he take this young man out like that? And the child suffered. Something happened with his heart where something didn't close, and he suffocated in his own blood. And I just kept thinking, like, that was 50% of my DNA. That was my nephew. I don't have a son, so it was like losing a son for me, in a way. And I showed up to the funeral. I was high on my mind on cocaine, and I had sunshades on, and even while being numb, it was the saddest experiences I have ever had in my life. I saw all my nieces, and I love those kids. I've been with them, and they're just broken. And we're burying, my nephew Junior next to all the other people we've lost in the family. And at that point, I didn't care about life or death anymore. I was pretty much using, if I died, I died. I had a suicide wish, because I was in so much pain. A lot of it was because I was connected to my sister, and I know how much pain she was in. It was the strength of my sister and her husband that helped me get out of that, because they overcame it. They have strong faith, and and then kind of the nail in the coffin times 2 was when my Uncle Brian, who was autistic, he was deaf. I was raised with him since I was a kid. He was pretty much my brother. We used to play basketball every day growing up, and I seen him go through so much stuff. He was abused, he was bullied, but he always kept light in his eye, and he was always about basketball, and he could beat my ass in any basketball game, and he just was so childlike, because even though he was in his 40s, he still had a mind of a 10-year-old, and so there's a beautiful thing. He never lost that inner child, which so many of us addicts lose, and he died, and it was a weird phenomenon that happened. So, and I was sleeping, and I had just visited him a couple weeks prior, and I could tell that he just didn't look healthy, but that was kind of normal at this point. But his heart started to go, because he had a heart transplant, and he started getting sick, and it started failing, and I had a dream, and he showed up in the dream, and it was that he said, "Hey, I need you." And I literally, no lie, I woke up to my mom calling me, saying that your uncle just passed away. And yeah, that really messed me up again. And that I wasn't there, I couldn't be there, but there was some type of connection, I can't explain this kind of stuff that happens. And from there on, this was about last year. I was, I think I had just started that codependent relationship I was telling you about, and so I was just in a bad place, and from then on, I just descended downward. I stayed in that relationship. I kept using more and more, not dealing with my issues. Me and my dad's relationship, which was the most troubling, was still haunting me. We had seen each other for the first time in 16 years, around 2020, and we were on good terms. And then just, my father was bipolar, addict, full-blown addict till this day. He had a lot of issues. I still love the guy, and I know he loves me, but he had a lot of trauma. He was a professional drummer, very successful, comes from a family of famous musicians, and he was a traumatized addict himself, and I learned a lot about that in treatment. And then he had called me and went on another tip and was mad at me, and it was kind of the dynamic that always happened. It was always this: I love you, son, you're the best, I fucking hate you. It got to the point where he's threatening to fight me, and so we hadn't made amends, and so I was just had all that, and all the death, and just my career was not doing anything. I wasn't training. I was in a relationship that was very honestly, I was very unhappy, but I was staying in it just because I was addicted to having someone there to help take care of me, because I didn't want to take responsibility for myself. And that's where it led. Eventually, because I was still so unhappy, I don't even know why this woman still stayed with me. Eventually she did leave. And then of course when she left, I was begging her back because my abandonment issues, but she never came back, and that's probably the best thing. But that rejection led me to a deeper spiral. And then I got into selling drugs, which I never thought I would do. I did that for about 6 months. And it showed me a side of addiction that will always stay with me, and I think it was the final nail in the coffin that made me want to get clean. And I have a good heart, I believe, and being in that business, you can't really have that. And so it got to the point where it was, all my friends were spending all their money, and I thought that these people just partied on the weekends, but no, a lot of my friends were full-blown addicts, but functional. And I just started seeing the destruction. I started seeing the destruction within myself, using more than I ever had because I had everything I needed. Risking my freedom and not caring if I got caught and went to jail or prison or even got shot or killed. But my brother called me one night and he was worried about me. My brother's Tony Sway is a successful music producer, and he's never drank or did drugs in his life. And we came from the same backgrounds, and he told me, you're not the brother that I remember or that I'm used to seeing. What's going on? And he just kind of held me accountable and checked me. And he said, I had a dream that you died, and there was nothing I could do to help you. And that fucking scared me, because I didn't want to hurt my family. I didn't want to do that to them. And I decided at that point that I needed to make a change. And that's what I had to do. I'm busy. Busy, guys. Sorry, roommate's trying to knock on the door. Yeah, that's when I decided I needed to change, but it was not really time. I wasn't really ready yet. And I went back. I ended up, using for a couple more months after that. I had texted a guy named Michael Gonzalez from Intervention, who's someone I really looked up to. It's a show I've been watching for 10, 15 years. And somehow I was able to get in contact with him and get his number at the end of a bender, because it got to the point where I was still using, but I just wanted so bad to be out of it. And basically I just texted him, and instead of getting this warm hey man, I want to save you, it was what are you doing? You need to get your shit together. You need to get some money. You need to get some insurance. You need to figure out how to get help. I'm gonna, he gave me that tough love that I needed. And And that's when I reached out to my uncle Kenny, who's a retired Air Force pararescueman, helicopter pilot, who came from pretty similar background as mine. He lost his aunt, and I lost my aunt, which was his mom. I called her auntie, but she was my grandmother's sister. And he's seen addiction and he's seen what it can do. And it was my first time of being vulnerable and really reaching out and asking him for help. And he was able to help me. And from there, that's when the process started of me getting into treatment. And, here we are. And, basically, he was just searched and we found Treehouse Recovery. And I was so ready to change. I was so tired of suffering. I was so tired of being in pain that I was ready to go. And I feel like everything had to happen exactly how it did, so I could be here. And that's basically what happened. And pack my bags for the first time of, I've moved out of my hometown in 12 years, and even when I did leave, it was briefly. But I was so ready to go. I was so tired of the party scene. I was so tired of everyone that knew me, all the people that judged me. That's not who I am. And who I really was a kid who was a, 3-year letterman in varsity football, who was recruited by Division I schools, junior college schools, out of high school, who decided to pursue a music career. I'm a person who had 2 music videos, over 15 million views on YouTube, and had a top 20 song in Brazil. Had all this success in different countries, and even some success in the States, and a YouTube channel that has over like 50 million views, and worked with, RCA Records, Atlantic Records, Def Jam Records, worked with people, like promoted videos for people that are mainstream artists, and was living his dream, so we thought, but it was still unhappy. I was someone who spoke about dreams and spoke about addiction, and then I fell into it myself. And just before my run of 2 years, the relapse, I had made a song called Lost in a High that's like around 300,000 views right now, but it was probably the most vulnerable and real record I ever made. And I feel like a hypocrite because I relapsed, and but the song's still amazing. And now here, I'm just about 6 months clean. It was the longest I've been sober in 7 or 8 years. I'm not here to preach and pretend like I'm some master of this. I'm just sharing my success story, because where I'm at right now is success, and I feel like maybe I can help somebody who is not at the level I'm at yet, and help get them to here. And I'm still reaching out and learning from people that are on higher levels than me, so I can continue to heal and get better. But so I ended up in treatment. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. This place, we were waking up at 5:30 a.m. every day, working out for 3.5 hours, then right into an addiction education class, and then right into one-on-one writing therapy, one-on-one talk therapy, then a process group, which is like an AA group with your team, then living in sober living and dealing with the trials and tribulations of living with a bunch of people with addiction. There was times in treatment where we had people come in here, and things got heated. There was potential fights. I was triggered many times in treatment, probably 3 or 4 times, where I wanted to pack my shit and leave. But I used something called other driver, which we learned here, and I was able to stay in treatment. And because what I had to go back to was so bad that I just stuck it out, and then something really crazy happened to me after I hit 3 months in treatment. I was playing pickup basketball, and I completely ruptured my right Achilles, which required reconstructive surgery to connect it again, and that was very devastating. Those were some some of the darkest days I've ever had in my life. I'm now 12 weeks out from it, and I feel better than I ever have. And during those times, I mean, imagine you have a debilitating injury, and you're in treatment, and you have to rely on your team for help. And I've always struggled with allowing people to help me. And so it was almost a blessing in disguise, because I had to melt that layer of myself that did not want to let people in. And it was a beautiful thing, and people lifted me up and helped me. But it was very challenging. And the program kept accountability and pressure on me, reasonably so. They were not going to allow me to become a victim of this injury and falter. And I was able to pick myself up, and I got through it, and I brought that dog out in me that I've always had. And you know, I got through treatment and got through my injury, and now I'm on the other side. I'm here in Portland, Oregon. I regularly go to NA and AA meetings at the Alano Club, which has been a blessing, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work that program. And I just stay focused on the principles that I've learned in treatment, which is having a program, waking up every day, cleaning your room, meditating, exercising, connecting with people. One of the biggest things I did in my addiction was isolate. I lived in the same apartment for 7 years, and the times that I was not sober, I was just drinking. I would run. I didn't want to deal with my problems. I had a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms, and I was able to work all of those things out. And I just want to be a beacon of hope for anyone that was where I was at. If you would have told me this time last year that I would be 6 months clean, graduated from one of the best treatment centers, in the United States, I would have dreamed that you were telling the truth, but I wouldn't know how I got there. And those times that I went through these last few years were so dark. I kept saying that there's a purpose behind this, because I've seen magic happen in my life before. I had dreams come true with music. A music video of my song, literally called Dreams, blew up in Brazil and has over like 20 million views worldwide. And I've seen that, and so I knew that there was something to come out of this. But this one was long. It was a long process, and when my ex left me last year, it was the hardest thing I've ever dealt with. I felt so alone. I relied on her for my self-esteem and self-worth, and she was gone, moved on to the next guy, and I had nothing. I could barely pay my rent. I totaled my car trying to get drugs and alcohol. I had nothing, and so all I had left to do was numb myself. And then that wasn't enough. One of the last times I got high, I was up for 2 days. I just surrendered, which is a step in the 12 steps. And I surrendered, and I said, God, I can't do this anymore. I need your help, please. And I cried out. I cried out on my knees, and I still remember. And he helped me. Whatever you believe in, I believe in a higher power. I'm not really religious, but I felt something. And it was like I started crying tears of joy, because I knew this was going to be over. Now where I'm at, I'm starting to getting back into writing music, making videos, launching this channel, Underdogs of Addiction. This is something I'm passionate about, and I want to help connect other addicts together so we're not alone. Help us all share what helped us get sober and get better. And this is just my introductory video. I want you guys to know who I am, and I'm somebody who most of my life I dealt with insecurities. Physical insecurities, being teased for having big eyes when I was young, or being teased for being too skinny, or being too big, or not having a dad, or being poor. I was never physically bullied or anything like that, but we get teased. I got held back when I was in first grade. When my earliest memory was seeing my dad punch holes in the walls. Domestic violence was rampant in our household. The first time I ever tried a fucking beer was Budweiser when I was 5. 5 years fucking old. I used to walk into my room and see my dad smoking weed. He was doing drugs. He was lost, and I didn't know what was going on. I was just a kid, and I had a lot of issues with my attachment with my parents, extreme codependency, and I realized a lot of my issues were the origin. That's the origin of them. And so I was able to work through and process all those things in treatment. And I'm going to make further videos explaining in detail some of the things that we did, but I just kind of wanted to make this video to show you guys, or speak to you guys about what it's been like for me. and yeah, and all those things that haunted me from my childhood, the rejection of my dad, because he was never really there emotionally, or there, he never really, there was not a lot of that. Sometimes he did, but it was just very rare. It was always Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. There was a lot of, I was scared, I didn't know how to trust people. Um, when I was 10 years old, the first time I seen my dad physically assault my mom, I thought he was gonna kill her. So I took a baseball bat, and my brother, he had schizophrenia at the time, and he was in a post-traumatic state of shock, I swear to God, and he was just shaking. He was bigger than me, and I was like 9 years old, and I took a baseball bat and had to crack my dad over the back to save my mom, and my mom ended up smashing him with the radio, and that was probably one of the last times I seen my dad. Maybe they did reconnect for maybe like a week, because that's what they would do. They'd fight and they'd get back together, and that was how my relationships went out. But the final straw was when I was around that age. I came home, and I took one of my toys in the tub, and my dad was just angry for whatever reason, and he took me and he threw me into the wall, and I didn't know why. And by that time, I pretty much just was numb. I disconnected from feeling. I disconnected from feeling anything, which a lot of us addicts do when we're traumatized as kids. We learn that feeling what we feel and expressing it is dangerous. And that was one of the many triggering things that happened. My dad also, one time after he got in a fight with my mom, told me that I wasn't his son and that he doesn't love me. You would think I would cry, but I was numb. By that time, I was just numb. The story goes deeper and darker. My older brother told me when my mom was pregnant with me and my twin sister, that my dad didn't want us, and he tried to kick us, literally kick my mom in the stomach and try to kill us. So the trauma runs deep, and it's crazy, but I learned how to forgive my dad. He's mentally ill, and he does have a good heart, but he's mentally ill, and he's never got the help he needed. He was abused a lot as a child. Was told that if he's not the number one, then he's nothing. As a child, he was a prodigy. I heard stories that he went on tour with Jason Newsted for Metallica. He was in multiple bands, but his addiction inevitably led him to never having a career. I used to see videos of my dad in Germany just playing the drums, and I was just in awe. I wanted to be like my dad. And it broke my heart that my dad pretty much left the family when I was 9 years old, no choice. And it was sad. I would see my dad trying to come and find us, and he'd show up to the random addresses we were at drunk, and I could tell, he was just in a lot of pain. And I have so much compassion and love for my dad, because I understand addiction now, and my dad was just a highly traumatized person who needed help. And there was good times with him growing up. He taught me how to ride a bike, throw football. There was a lot of good times, and as a 33-year-old man, it still hurts me that we weren't able to have the relationship that I needed. But I have my Uncle Kenny, I have other mentors, I have people in my life who fill that void, and I'm very thankful. And the last time I spoke to my dad was a couple months before I came to treatment. It was June 19th, my birthday, and it was Father's Day, and I was listening to a DMX song, rest in peace DMX, called Letter to My Son, and I was doing a bunch of lines of coke, and I was very lonely and sad, and I called my dad, and we had one of the best conversations that we ever had, and it was very healing. It was like my dad was coherent and normal for once, and we just talked, and it was beautiful. And I haven't talked to him since, not because I don't want to, I just haven't got a hold of him. He's very sick. He's in his late 50s, and he has issues, and I don't think he has much time, but I'm just glad that we're at peace. And I love my pops, and I always wish that he could get better, but it just never happened. And that's why I take my sobriety so serious, because I don't want to go that way. And I'm glad I haven't had any children yet, because I was not ready. I'm still doing the work on myself, and I feel like here soon I'll be in a place where I can bring a child into this world, because that's what I really want more than anything. But I really had to deal with this work, so I did not pass that on to my son, my daughter. And yeah, so there's a little bit about me. Please subscribe to Underdogs of Addiction. I am Zarek Simmons, and I appreciate everyone that stayed and watched this whole video. I have a lot of ideas of what I want to do on this channel, But if you guys have any other questions and want to know any other things about me or any topics that you want me to discuss, just leave a comment below. And thank you guys for watching.